The air tasted of ash and ozone, thick with the metallic tang of spilled blood. Sergeant Kalen of the Imperial Guard's Cadian 88th Regiment pressed himself against the shattered remains of a ferrocrete wall, the multilars of a traitor guard platoon stitching fiery lines across the plaza where moments before his squad had been advancing. His voxcaster crackled, spitting static and panicked reports of overwhelming enemy numbers. Desperation was a cold knot in his gut, but Cadians didn't break. "Not yet. Fall back. To the comms bunker." Kalen roared, his voice hoarse over the din of battle. His helmet display flickered, showing 3 of his men still pinned, their positions exposed. He knew what a direct hit from a multilass could do. He'd seen it countless times. He'd lived it more often than he cared to remember. The world was a maelstrom of destruction. Buildings, once proud symbols of imperial might, now stood as broken teeth against a perpetually smoke-choked sky. The ground trembled with the distant rumble of artillery, each concussion a fresh blow against the city's collapsing defenses. This was Cadia, the bulwark against the eye of terror, and it was dying. Every soldier knew it, felt it, lived it. They fought on anyway, because to do otherwise was unthinkable. A heavy stubber opened up from a collapsed manufactorum across the street, its rhythmic thudding chewing through concrete and spitting shrapnel. A guardsman near Kalen cried out, a high-pitched sound quickly swallowed by the cacophony. Kalen risked a glance. Private Jorik, young and green, clutched his arm, blood welling through his fingers. "Medic!" Kalen shouted, but there was no medic. Not anymore. Not for this sector. He raised his hotshot lasgun, aiming at the muzzle flash of the stubber, and squeezed the trigger. A concentrated beam of energy lanced out, striking the embrasure with a shower of sparks, but the fire didn't stop. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and slowly, inexorably, being encircled. This wasn't a retreat. It was a delaying action for a delay, a dying gasp in a war that had no end. The comms bunker was their last viable rally point, a slim hope of coordinating with other shattered regiments, or at least dying with a purpose. His own breathing was ragged, each inhale burning his lungs. The smell of plasma discharge and burning flesh was nauseating. He had to keep moving, had to get his men out. What remained of them, anyway? Advance to contact, then withdraw to designated rally point Alpha. Captain Valerius's voice sliced through the vox, strained but unyielding. Priority, secure the regimental banner. Glory to the Emperor. The banner. Kalen gritted his teeth, a symbolic gesture in a literal hell. But the captain was right. It was a beacon. It was what they fought for, what they died for. It was Cadia. As they sprinted across a debris-strewn street, dodging crater-sized impacts and the ceaseless chatter of small arms fire, a blinding light ripped through the sky above. It wasn't the searing blue of a plasma blast, nor the sickly green of warp lightning. This was pure incandescent white, impossibly bright, like a sun tearing itself apart. It flared, then vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving a strange, echoing silence in its wake. For a precious few seconds, even the ceaseless war seemed to hold its breath. Then, a new sound began. Not a roar of battle, but a high-pitched, rapidly growing shriek, like something impossibly massive tearing through the very fabric of reality. It grew louder, a sound that vibrated in Kalen's bones, making his teeth ache. It was descending, fast, directly towards their position. "What in the Emperor's name is that?" someone yelled, his voice raw with fear. Kalen squinted upwards, his vision struggling against the lingering afterimage of the light. He saw a shape, indistinct at first, then growing with terrifying speed. It was massive, like a plummeting comet, yet it seemed almost fluid. Not rock, not metal, but something utterly alien. Something that burned with an internal light. It slammed into the ground less than a kilometer away with an impact that dwarfed any artillery strike. The world shook. The air punched out, a physical force that knocked Kalen off his feet, sending him sprawling amidst broken glass and twisted rebar. A colossal dust cloud, incandescent and furious, erupted from the impact site, boiling outwards, swallowing ruined buildings whole. The sound was deafening, a singular, world-shattering crash that seemed to rip the very air from his lungs. For a moment, he thought the planet itself had cracked open. He lay there dazed, ears ringing, the smell of burning earth filling his nostrils. His vision swam. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. The comms bunker was gone, a crater where it once stood, obscured by the roiling dust storm. His men, those who weren't pulverized by the shockwave, were scattered, moaning, or desperately trying to regain their footing. "Report," Kalen bellowed, but his voice was swallowed by the ringing in his ears. He stumbled towards where the impact had occurred, driven by Acadian's unthinking urge to confront the enemy, no matter how impossible. The dust began to settle, revealing a crater hundreds of meters wide, its edges still glowing faintly with residual energy. At its center, a new light began to coalesce. It was a figure, a man, impossibly. He stood at the very heart of the devastation, completely unharmed. The lingering dust swirled around him, but did not cling to him. He was tall, powerfully built, clad in a strange, form-fitting blue suit, with a vibrant red cape that fluttered gently in the non-existent breeze, and on his chest, a symbol, a red S on a yellow shield, utterly alien and utterly inexplicable. He looked around him, his expression one of confusion, then dawning horror at the sheer scale of the destruction. Kalen stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were showing him. No man could survive that. No man could stand untouched amidst such utter obliteration. This was no warrior of the Imperium, no psyker, no demon. This was something else entirely. Something new. The traitor guard, initially stunned, began to recover. They spotted the figure in the crater, and then Kalen and his scattered men. A multilass chattered to life, spitting bolts of energy towards the crater, aiming for the inexplicable newcomer. The bolts struck the man's chest. They splashed off him like drops of water, leaving not even a scorch mark. Kalen watched, dumbfounded, as the man turned, his eyes narrowing. The multilass team continued their fire, their frantic bursts of energy illuminating the bizarre scene. Then the man in blue moved, not with the heavy armored gait of a space marine, nor the lightning-fast blur of an Eldar, but with an effortless, almost casual speed. He was across the crater in an instant, a blue blur that moved faster than the eye could follow. He was among the traitor guardsmen before they could even scream. Kalen saw a flash of red and blue, then a crunch, sickeningly audible even from this distance. A multi-lass weapon was twisted into a pretzel, its barrel mangled. The man who held it was tossed aside like a ragdoll, hitting a ruined wall with a sickening thud. The stranger moved through the enemy lines like a storm, each strike precise, devastating, yet oddly devoid of malice. He wasn't killing them with glee, but disarming them, dismantling their weapons, throwing them clear of the fight. He moved too fast for Kalen to track properly, but the results were undeniable. Traitor guardsmen, moments before a disciplined, bloodthirsty unit, were now scattered, broken, and terrified. Weapons were bent, shattered, or simply ripped from their hands. Men lay stunned or groaning, not dead, but utterly incapacitated. It was a brutal efficiency Kalen had never witnessed, not even from the Emperor's Angels of Death. This was no Imperial saint, no daemon, and certainly no Xenos Kalen had ever encountered in his long, bloody service. The man's power was absolute, terrifying, yet somehow contained. It was an impossible factor in a war that had always been defined by grim, relentless attrition. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Kalen roared, scrambling over rubble, trying to reach his surviving men. He didn't know if this stranger was friend or foe, but he had just wiped out an entire enemy platoon without a single shot fired, without a single life taken. That was something Kalen had to understand. This man, this anomaly, had arrived on Cadia at its darkest hour. Was he a blessing or a new, even more terrifying doom? Private Jorik, still clutching his bleeding arm, stared at the retreating blue figure with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Sergeant, what in the Emperor's name was that?" Kalen didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the ground had stopped shaking, the traitor guardsmen were neutralized, and a new, incomprehensible variable had just been dropped into the heart of a war that had no variables. He could only watch as the man, seemingly unfazed by the chaos he'd wrought, hovered for a moment above the pulverized comms bunker, his strange, alien eyes scanning the ruined landscape with an intense, unreadable gaze. The red cape billowed behind him, a stark, defiant splash of color against the grim, ash-choked sky of dying Cadia. The remnants of Kalen's squad gathered around him, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and utterly bewildered confusion. They had seen horrors beyond imagining, fought foes that defied sanity, but this This was different. This defied everything they knew about the galaxy, about power, about the very laws of physics. Report. Sergeant Kalen. Valerius's voice crackled again on the Vox, sharper this time, carrying an edge of demand. What was that impact? And why has the enemy fire ceased in your sector? Kalen swallowed, the metallic taste of dust in his mouth. He looked at the vast crater, then at the unnervingly calm figure hovering above it, surveying the devastation. Captain, he began, his voice rough. I don't know what to report. Something crashed. A man. He stopped the enemy attack, without a weapon. Silence crackled on the Vox for a long moment, broken only by distant gunfire and the static hum. Then, Valerius's voice returned, laced with grim skepticism. A man, Kalen, unarmed? Explain yourself. Is this a new Xenos threat? A demon manifestation? Do you require orbital bombardment of your position? Kalen looked at the man in blue, who had now descended into the crater again, his gaze fixed on something within the wreckage. He saw no signs of warp corruption, no grotesque mutations, no alien chitin. Just a man, seemingly a human, but one whose very presence shattered the rules of reality. Negative, Captain. He doesn't appear to be hostile to us. He just disarmed the enemy, broke their weapons. He didn't kill them. Kalen paused, searching for the words to describe the indescribable. He flew, sir, and multi-lass fire didn't even scratch him. Another beat of silence. Then a new voice broke in, cold and authoritative. Sergeant Kalen, identify your regimental designation and current coordinates. This is Colonel Kestis of the 77th Cadian. Elaborate on your observations. What you are describing is impossible. Kalen reeled slightly. Colonel Kestis, a notoriously pragmatic, unyielding officer known for his absolute adherence to doctrine. If Kestis was on the Vox, this anomaly had already drawn high-level attention. Sergeant Kalen, 88th Cadian. Remaining elements currently at grid reference Gamma 7 to 9, Kalen responded, his voice regaining some of its usual steel despite the bewilderment. He looked at the man in blue, who was now slowly moving through the crater, gently pushing aside rubble, as if searching for something. He's wearing a blue suit, red cape, with a strange symbol on his chest. Red S on a yellow field. He arrived in a flash of light, impacted with catastrophic force but is unharmed. He moved at impossible speeds, neutralized the enemy without lethal force, and is impervious to small arms fire. He appears human, but is clearly not. A flurry of urgent whispers and static filled the Vox channel. Then Kestis's voice, tighter now. Sergeant, maintain visual on the entity. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Avoid provocation. Is there any indication of psychic power? Warp taint? Demonic manifestation? None that I can perceive, sir, Kalen reported, keeping his eyes fixed on the blue-clad figure. The man had stopped in the middle of the crater. He knelt down, then gently, carefully, lifted a small spherical object from the wreckage. It glowed faintly, a dull silver. It looked like some kind of strange pod or craft, impossibly small given the impact it had generated. The man held it tenderly, almost reverently. As he watched, a new threat emerged from the smoke-filled ruins. A patrol of chaos cultists, their ragged robes and crude weapons smeared with glyphs of the ruinous powers, their eyes burning with mad fanaticism, stumbled into the area. They hadn't seen the man in blue yet, their attention drawn to Kalen's scattered squad. For the dark gods. Blood for the blood god, one shrieked, raising a rusty chain axe. They charged, their numbers perhaps 24, but their berserker rage made them a dangerous foe, especially to a depleted, shaken squad. Kalen instinctively raised his laser gun. Form up, repel the cultists, he commanded, his voice raw. His men, despite their shock, snapped back to attention, their Cadian training kicking in. But as they prepared to open fire, the man in blue, still cradling the glowing sphere, looked up. His eyes, which Kalen had glimpsed only briefly before, now seemed to burn with an inner light, a piercing, almost painful intensity. He wasn't looking at Kalen's squad. He was looking at the approaching cultists. His face, previously marked by confusion and horror, hardened into a look of fierce, unyielding resolve. This was no longer a man lost and bewildered. This was a man who had found his purpose. A man who would act. Stay back, the man said, his voice surprisingly deep, clear and resonant, cutting through the din of the battlefield, somehow audible even over the cultists' frenzied screams. It was a voice that commanded attention, a voice that carried an unspoken weight of authority. The cultists, hearing the unknown voice, faltered for a second. Their fanatical rage flickered with confusion. They saw the man, impossibly clean and unblemished amidst the devastation, holding a strange orb. To them, he was an unknown, perhaps even a new avatar of their dark gods, or a hated anomaly to be purged. One of the cultists, a towering brute with a flayed skin cloak, roared defiance and lunged forward, his chain axe revving with a hungry snarl. The man in blue didn't flinch. He carefully placed the glowing orb on the ground beside him, then straightened up, his red cape fanning out behind him. His eyes flared brighter, a piercing, almost ethereal blue. He took a single step, then vanished. He reappeared directly in the path of the charging cultist, moving with such impossible speed that Kaelin's mind struggled to register it. The chain axe swung, a blur of spinning teeth and bloodlust, but the man caught it, not with a hand, but with an outstretched bare palm. The revving weapon shrieked against his skin, its teeth sparking furiously, but it did not cut. It did not even break the skin. The man held it firm, his expression utterly unwavering, as if he had just caught a falling leaf. The cultist's eyes widened in horror, a gurgle of disbelief escaping his lips. He tried to pull the axe back, but it was stuck, held fast by an unseen, immovable force. The man in blue simply twisted his wrist. The chain axe shrieked, then crumpled into a ball of mangled metal, its motor dying with a pathetic whine. With a swift, almost casual motion, the man delivered an open-palmed strike to the cultist's chest. There was a sickening crack, and the cultist flew backwards like a stone from a sling, crashing into his brethren with bone-jarring force. The other cultists, witnessing this impossible display of strength, froze. Their fanaticism warred with a primal, terrifying fear. Then the man moved again. He was a whirlwind of motion, a blue and red blur amidst the chaotic, screaming mass of cultists. He didn't kill them. He disarmed them with brutal efficiency, twisting rusted blades into knots, snapping chain axes in half, smashing crude autoguns into useless heaps of metal and wood. Each strike was perfectly aimed to incapacitate, to stun, to remove the weapon without ending a life. He moved too fast to be caught, too strong to be stopped. Cultists were thrown aside like bags of grain, slammed into walls, or simply knocked unconscious with precise, concussive blows. Their roars of fury turned to screams of terror, then to whimpers of pain. Within seconds, what had been a charging, fanatical horde was reduced to a scattered, groaning mess, their weapons destroyed, their will to fight shattered. Not a single life had been taken, but the cultists were utterly broken. Kaelin lowered his laser gun, his mind reeling. He had just witnessed a single man, unarmed, unarmored, decimate a fanatical enemy force with a speed and power that defied everything he knew. This wasn't just strength, it was an entirely new scale of power, an existence outside the grim calculus of the Imperium. The man in blue stood over the last groaning cultist, his piercing blue eyes surveying the scene. Then he turned back towards Kaelin's squad. His gaze swept over them, assessing their battered forms, their weary faces. Kaelin felt a strange sensation, not fear, but an intense, almost overwhelming sense of scrutiny. "You are soldiers?" the man asked, his voice softer now, tinged with a deep sadness, as if the destruction around him was a personal burden. Kaelin hesitated, then snapped to attention, despite the weariness in his bones. "Sergeant Kaelin, 88th Cadian Regiment, Imperial Guard, sir," he responded, without thinking. The "sir" slipped out naturally. The man's presence demanded it. The man nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the Cadian insignia on Kaelin's uniform. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice low. "What happened here?" He gestured vaguely at the ruined city, the smoke-choked sky, the endless sounds of war. His expression was one of profound bewilderment, a desperate need for answers. Kaelin exchanged a glance with his remaining men. How to explain Cadia? How to explain the Imperium? How to explain a galaxy consumed by eternal war to someone who seemed to embody a different, impossible reality? "You are on Cadia, sir," Kaelin began, choosing his words carefully. "A fortress world. We are under attack, from forces of chaos, traitors and demons." He pointed towards the distant, roiling storm clouds that were the eye of terror. "They come from there, from the warp." The man in blue followed his gaze, his brow furrowing deeper. Chaos warp? I don't understand. My ship, my pod, it brought me here through something. A tear in space. I was supposed to find a new home, a safe haven. He looked at the devastation around him, at the grim, determined faces of Kalen's squad. This is not safe. This is hell. His voice was filled with a raw, undeniable anguish. Kalen felt a pang of something akin to sympathy. This impossible being, with his impossible powers, was lost. And now, he was in the heart of the galaxy's most brutal war. The Vox crackled again, more urgently this time. Sergeant Kalen, respond. What is your status? What is the entity's disposition? We are picking up massive energy fluctuations from your sector, consistent with impossible power levels. Do you have contact? Is it hostile? It was Colonel Kestis again, his voice now a tense demand. Kalen looked at the man in blue, then at the Voxcaster. He knew this moment was critical. How he answered, how he chose to characterize this stranger, could mean the difference between an alliance and an orbital bombardment. He is not hostile, Colonel, Kalen reported, his voice firm. He disarmed a cultist attack. He appears to be bewildered, lost, and looking for answers. He took a deep breath. I believe he could be an asset, sir. A significant asset. A short, sharp laugh, devoid of humor, echoed through the Vox. An asset, Sergeant. You believe this unknown, reality-defying entity, whose very presence strains the fabric of what we understand, could be an asset in the defense of Cadia. This smacks of Xenos deception, or worse, psychic manipulation. Kestis's voice was cold steel. Maintain observation, Kalen. Do not, under any circumstances, allow him access to any Imperial facilities or personnel beyond your immediate squad. Do not engage in any offensive action with this being. Await further orders. We are analyzing the energy signature and preparing countermeasures. Kalen's blood ran cold. Countermeasures. That meant weapons, orbital strikes, everything the Imperium used to purge the unknown. He looked at the powerful, yet seemingly gentle man who had just saved his squad, who stood there with an expression of profound sorrow and confusion. This wasn't a demon. This wasn't a rampaging Xenos. This was someone lost, in a world that would tear him apart just for being different. The man in blue looked at Kalen. His eyes, those impossible luminous blue eyes, seemed to pierce straight through to Kalen's thoughts. You speak of a larger war, he said, his voice quiet. Who are you fighting, and why is this happening? He gestured around again, his pain palpable. I have to help. I cannot stand by while this suffering continues. His words were simple, yet carried an immense weight. He wanted to help. In this galaxy of eternal war, of hatred and suffering, a being of impossible power wanted to help. Kalen had seen many things in his life, but never such pure, unadulterated intent. Before Kalen could respond, a new sound ripped through the air, distinct from the ceaseless din of artillery and small arms fire. It was a high-pitched, metallic shriek, accompanied by the heavy, rhythmic thud of a colossal walker. From around a crumbling corner of a once grand administrative building, a towering metal monstrosity emerged. It was a Chaos Knight, a colossal war machine of corrupted adamantium and twisted weaponry. Lumbering forward with malevolent intent, its armored carapace was adorned with grotesque spikes and foul symbols, its massive battle cannon glowing with nascent plasma, its Reaper chainswords stained with the gore of countless innocents, its skull-faced head swiveled, its glowing red eyes fixing on Kalen's squad, and then on the impossible blue figure in the crater. The Vox went silent. All attention, all communications were now focused on this new, devastating threat. The Chaos Knight raised its battle cannon, a weapon capable of vaporizing entire platoons. The man in blue, still cradling the small, glowing orb, saw the approaching titan of war. His eyes narrowed. His expression shifted, from confusion to understanding, and then a blazing, furious determination. He placed the orb carefully back down in the crater, stepped forward, and faced the behemoth. Kalen knew, with a chilling certainty, that this moment would define everything. This was the test. This was where the unknown variable would either shatter or become something unimaginable. He watched, breathless, as the Chaos Knight's battle cannon charged, its plasma vent glowing with an unholy intensity, aiming directly at the man in blue. The man stood utterly still, defiant, his red cape whipping in a sudden, impossible gust of wind. The colossal chaos. Knight's battle cannon thrummed, a sickening whine preceding the blinding flash of superheated plasma. Kalen instinctively threw himself flat, his men following suit, their hands clamped over their ears. The air distorted, shimmered with heat, and a searing blue-white orb of pure energy launched itself towards the man in blue. It struck him full on. Kalen braced for impact, for the explosion that would atomize anything in its path. But there was no explosion. The plasma blast seemed to part around the man, like water around a stone, dissipating into harmless tendrils of vapor and light. The ground where he stood was untouched. The man himself remained rooted, utterly unharmed, his red cape rippling around him as if caught in a violent updraft. The Chaos Knight's internal vox speakers, amplified to a demonic shriek, roared in frustrated fury. "Impossible! You defy the will of the dark gods!" The man in blue looked at the monstrous war machine, his expression no longer confused or sorrowful, but grimly determined. He took a deep breath, and Kalen heard a faint, deep resonance, a sound that vibrated in his teeth. Then the man launched himself forward. He didn't fly in the conventional sense, not with jets or grav chutes. He simply moved, a blue and red streak that defied the laws of motion. One moment he was in the crater, the next he was closing the distance to the night, 100 meters covered in less time than it took for Kalen's eyes to blink. The knight reacted with surprising speed, its Reaper chainsword, a colossal blade wreathed in crackling energy and bloodlust, swiping down in a wide arcing cut. The man didn't dodge. He met the blade. He caught the spinning, tearing teeth of the chainsword in his bare hands. Metal shrieked against flesh, a sound of grinding, protesting adamantium that should have been impossible. Sparks showered like a forge in full swing. Kalen could see the knight's pilot, a shadowy, hulking figure within the cockpit, jerking at the controls, trying to force the blade through the impossible obstruction. But it held. The man in blue held the chainsword as easily as a Cadian holding a bayonet. Then, with a flex of impossible muscles, he began to bend it. The knight's massive arm groaned, its servos screaming in protest. The chainsword, a weapon designed to cleave through tanks and fortifications, began to warp, to twist, to fold in on itself. A sickening crack reverberated across the plaza as the blade snapped at its hilt, the shattered remains falling to the ground like discarded toys. The knight bellowed again, a guttural sound of rage and disbelief, and unleashed its battle cannon once more. A full volley of plasma blasts. The man in blue didn't flinch. He simply met each blast, deflecting them with incredible speed and precision. One he caught on an outstretched hand, redirecting it harmlessly into the sky. Another he intercepted mid-air, dissolving its energy with a mere focused glare. Kalen realized, with a jolt, that the man's eyes were glowing with the same piercing blue light that had flared when he disarmed the cultists. This was not just strength, it was control. Absolute, precise control over incomprehensible power. The knight, now effectively disarmed of its primary close combat weapon, tried to stomp on him. Its massive foot, a multi-ton slab of armored metal, descended with earth-shattering force. The man in blue simply held his ground. He caught the foot, not just stopping it, but lifting it. The entire Chaos Knight, a walking fortress of war, tilted precariously, its pilot struggling to maintain balance. With an effort that seemed casual to him, but would have shattered mountains for any other being, the man in blue exerted force. A deep, guttural groan tore from the knight's internal systems as its leg, an impossibly thick piston of adamantium and ceramite, buckled. The man twisted, leveraging his strength, and with a series of grinding, tearing sounds, he ripped the leg clean off the knight's chassis. The colossal war machine lost its balance, keeling over with a screech of tortured metal, crashing into the ruined administrative building with a cataclysmic roar. Dust and debris exploded outwards. The ground shook violently, even more so than from its initial landing. The building, already a skeletal ruin, collapsed further, burying the fallen knight in a mountain of rubble and twisted girders. Silence. A profound, echoing silence broken only by the distant, ceaseless hum of Cadia's dying war. Kalen and his men lay prone, staring with wide, disbelieving eyes at the cloud of dust where the knight had been. Then, through the settling dust, the man in blue emerged. He He was completely pristine. Not a single scratch or speck of dust on his blue suit or vibrant red cape. He walked over to the ruined knight, now a mangled heap of metal, and looked down at it. Kalen saw him reach in, not with violence, but with a strange, careful precision. He pulled out a figure, the pilot, from the wreckage of the cockpit. The pilot was a monstrously mutated man, fused with the machine, his face a rictus of terror and pain, his eyes burning with unnatural light. He shrieked, a sound of pure warp-fueled hatred, and lunged with a hidden, corrupted blade. The man in blue caught the blade, bending it instantly. He looked at the pilot, not with anger, but with an expression Kalen couldn't quite decipher. It was a mixture of sorrow and a grim understanding. He then delivered a precise, open-palm strike to the pilot's helmeted head. The pilot went limp, unconscious, but Kalen saw no sign of lethal injury. The man simply laid the unconscious pilot down gently amidst the rubble, then turned back towards Kalen's squad. The Voxcaster, which had been silent, erupted with a storm of panicked, disbelieving voices. "My Emperor! Did you see that? The Knight is down! The Chaos Knight is down! Impossible! Energy readings off the scale! What is that thing?" Then Colonel Kestis's voice cut through the clamor, sharp and strained. "Sergeant Kalen, report. Confirmed status of the entity and the Chaos Knight." Kalen pushed himself up, his limbs feeling heavy, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. "Colonel," he said, his voice hoarse, "the Chaos Knight is neutralized, completely incapacitated. The entity, the man in blue, did it, single-handedly, without a weapon. He tore it apart." A stunned silence on the Vox. Then, Kestis, his voice tight with barely suppressed awe and fear. "Tore it apart, Kalen? A Chaos Knight? That is unheard of. Any casualties to our forces?" "Negative, sir. My squad is intact. The night pilot is incapacitated, not killed." Kalen added the last detail, knowing it was important. The man in blue was clearly powerful, but he seemed to have a distinct aversion to killing. "Incapacitated?" Kestis echoed, the disbelief evident. "He took down a knight and left the pilot alive. What madness is this?" "Kalen, you are ordered to approach the entity. Maintain a safe distance, but establish clear communication. Try to ascertain its intentions, its origin, anything, but do not drop your guard. This could be a new form of deception, a psychic construct of the ruinous powers designed to sow confusion." Kalen nodded, though Kestis couldn't see him. He looked at the man in blue, who was now slowly walking back towards the crater, towards the small, glowing orb he had left there. Kalen raised his hand in a tentative gesture, a Cadian sergeant trying to signal a being who had just ripped apart a war machine. "Sir," Kalen called out, his voice a little shaky, "my colonel wishes to know your intentions and your identity." The man in blue stopped at the edge of the crater, his back to Kalen, and knelt to retrieve the glowing sphere. He held it gently, his gaze fixed on its silver surface. "My intentions," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, "are to help, to stop this suffering, to find a place where I can belong." He paused, then turned, holding the orb in one hand, gesturing to the devastated landscape with the other. "And my identity, I am Kal-El, but on my homeworld, they called me Superman." Superman. The name felt strange and alien in Kalen's mouth, but somehow it fit. It described what he was. "Kal-El," Kalen repeated, testing the name. "Superman, you said you came from another world. What is your origin?" Superman looked at the small orb, then back at Kalen. "I am the last son of Krypton," he said, his voice tinged with ancient sorrow. "My parents sent me away in this pod when our planet was dying. They sought a safe haven for me, a place where I could live and use my abilities to help others. This pod, it was supposed to take me to a world where I would be safe, where I could be a beacon of hope." He looked around at the grim, ash-choked sky, the ruins, the endless war. "This is not that world, is it?" Kalen felt a pang in his chest. A lost child, the last of his kind, dumped into the most brutal war in the galaxy. "This is Cadia, Kal-El, the shield of the Imperium, and it is being shattered. We fight for humanity, for the survival of our species against forces that would enslave or annihilate us." Superman's eyes narrowed. "Enslave? Annihilate? Who are these chaos forces you speak of?" Kalen tried to explain, choosing his words carefully, simplifying the grim horrors of the warp for a being who seemed to embody a purer, simpler ideal. "They are worshippers of ancient, malevolent gods, entities from beyond reality, who feed on suffering and destruction. They twist humanity, turn brother against brother, and seek to bring all creation into their endless darkness. They are the antithesis of everything that is good and ordered. Superman listened, his brow furrowed, his gaze intense. When Kalen finished, he looked at the glowing orb in his hand, then out at the ruined city. My parents wished for me to live a life of peace and to use my powers for good, to stand for truth and justice. If this chaos seeks to destroy that, then I cannot stand by. I cannot allow this suffering to continue. He looked at Kalen, his eyes burning with renewed resolve. I will help you. I will fight these chaos forces, but I will not kill. I will not take a life if there is another way. Kalen felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation. Relief that this incomprehensibly powerful being was on their side. Trepidation at his impossible condition. Not killing. In this war against chaos, it was an alien concept. But he had just witnessed Superman incapacitate an entire platoon of traitor guardsmen, a horde of cultists, and a chaos knight, all without lethal force. It was unprecedented. Colonel Kestis, Kalen said into the Vox, his voice firmer now. The entity identifies himself as Kal-El, or Superman. He claims to be the last survivor of a destroyed world, sent here seeking a safe haven. He has offered to assist us in defending Cadia against the forces of chaos. He states he will not kill if there is another way, but his actions against the Knight and the cultists confirm his intent to incapacitate rather than destroy our enemies. A longer silence this time. Kalen could almost hear the frantic consultations, the strategizing at the highest levels. Then Kestis's voice returned, still wary, but with a new, urgent edge. Sergeant Kalen, this is highly irregular, unprecedented. But the situation on Cadia is desperate. Every sector is collapsing. We are facing annihilation. If this Superman truly possesses the capabilities you describe, and is indeed not hostile to us, then we may have no other choice but to accept his aid. A collective sigh of relief, though silent, passed through Kalen's men. Kalen, bring him to me, Kestis ordered. My command post is at the Bastion of Fallen Heroes Grid Delta 42. It is heavily fortified, but under constant assault. We need to assess him, and if possible, deploy him to a critical front immediately. Can he transport himself there? Kalen looked at Kal-El. He can fly, sir, at impossible speeds. Then bring him, and bring your squad. You will be his direct liaison. Brief him on the strategic situation as best you can en route. This is a direct order, Sergeant. Failure is not an option. Understood, Colonel, Kalen replied, snapping a quick salute. He turned to Kal-El. Kal-El, Colonel Kestis wishes for you to come to his command post. He wants to discuss your assistance. It's some distance from here. Kal-El nodded, his expression resolute. Lead the way, Sergeant. He carefully tucked the glowing orb into a hidden pouch within his suit, securing it. It seemed profoundly important to him. Kalen gestured for his men to form up. Private Yorick, you're injured. Can you move? Yorick, still holding his arm, nodded bravely. Yes, Sergeant. I can march. Kal-El looked at Yorick's wound, his brow furrowing with concern. You are injured. I can take you there quickly. All of you, Kalen blinked. Take us how? Kal-El offered a small, almost shy smile. I can carry you. He gestured to the sky. We will be much faster. Kalen hesitated. The idea of being carried by this impossible man, flying through the hellish skies of Cadia, was beyond surreal. But time was of the essence, and Yorick was wounded. All right, Kalen said, making a snap decision. Yorick, you go first, then the rest of us. Spread out. We don't want to be easy targets up there. He glanced at Kal-El, an unspoken question in his eyes. Kal-El seemed to understand. He knelt, then gently scooped up Yorick, holding him cradled in his arms as if the young guardsman weighed nothing. Yorick, wide-eyed with a mixture of fear and awe, managed a faint gasp. Hold on, Kal-El instructed gently, then launched himself skyward. He ascended with a soundless rush of air, a blue and red blur against the smoke-choked sky. He was not just fast. He was effortless. Kalen watched, dumbfounded, as Yorick, still clutched in Kal-El's arms, was carried higher and higher, disappearing into the swirling soot. He returned moments later, depositing Yorick carefully on the ground. The private looked dazed but unharmed, his fear replaced by a bewildered grin. By the Emperor's holy light, Sergeant, I was flying, Yorick exclaimed, sounding more excited than afraid, his pain temporarily forgotten. Kal-El returned and carefully took 2 more guardsmen. Then another 2, ferrying Kalen's entire squad, including the wounded Jorik, to a point near the Bastion of Fallen Heroes in a matter of minutes. Each trip was a silent, impossible blur, a testament to speed and power Kalen could barely comprehend. Finally, it was Kalen's turn. Kal-El gently scooped him up. Kalen felt no strain, no sense of being lifted, just a sudden, effortless upward motion. The world blurred beneath them, the sounds of battle fading into a distant murmur as they ascended above the perpetual dust and smoke clouds. Kalen had glimpsed Cadia from an atmospheric dropship many times, but never like this. Never with such clarity. Never with such a sense of silent, impossible speed. He saw the vast, burning swathes of the planet, the endless siege lines, the roiling red eye of the warp looming on the horizon. It was a sight of utter devastation, yet from this height, carried by this impossible being, Kalen felt a strange, detached calm. Kal-El spoke, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the rush of air. Tell me about this Bastion of Fallen Heroes. What is its strategic importance? Kalen, despite the surreal nature of the moment, snapped back to his professional duty. The Bastion is one of the last major command nodes for our sector. It holds vital communications arrays and strategic data. If it falls, coordination across the entire front will collapse further. It's also where Colonel Kestis is, directing what remains of the defense. As they approached, the Bastion became visible. It was a colossal, brutalist fortress of ferrocrete and plasteel, scarred by countless impacts, but still standing defiant. Around it, the battle was raging with renewed fury. Kalen could see waves of Chaos Space Marines, their power armor black and crimson, breaching the outer defenses, supported by platoons of traitor guard and grotesque demon engines. The air was thick with the crisscrossing trails of last fire, the explosive impacts of artillery, and the chilling screams of the dying. Kal-El descended swiftly, depositing Kalen gently within the relative safety of a shattered courtyard just outside the Bastion's main entrance. His squad was already there, weapons at the ready, watching the unfolding battle with grim determination. The Bastion is under heavy assault. Sir, Kalen reported to Kal-El, pointing towards the thickest part of the fighting. Chaos Space Marines. They are genetically engineered super soldiers, powerful and utterly ruthless. They will show no mercy. Kal-El's eyes, those luminous blue orbs, scanned the battlefield. Kalen saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. Super soldiers? He murmured, a flicker of something almost like sadness in his gaze. They fight for chaos? They have willingly turned their backs on humanity and embraced the ruinous powers, Kalen confirmed. They are instruments of pure destruction. Before Kal-El could respond, a squad of Imperial Guard stormtroopers, clad in their characteristic carapace armor, emerged from a fortified bunker, their hotshot laser guns spitting lethal beams into the charging enemy. Their sergeant, a stern-faced woman with bionic implants, spotted Kalen. Sergeant Kalen, 88th Cadian, she barked, her voice amplified by her helmet's vox. Colonel Kestis is expecting you. And your guest? Her eyes lingered on Kal-El, a mixture of awe and suspicion. The colonel is in the main command center, level 3. Follow me. Kal-El looked at the raging battle, then at the entrance to the Bastion. This command center, is it deep within the fortress?
Yes, sir,
the stormtrooper sergeant replied, clearly unnerved by the direct question from this impossibly calm figure. Protected by multiple layers of defense. The Bastion is under attack. Lives are at stake out here, Kal-El stated, his voice carrying an unshakable conviction. I must help them. He made a move towards the battle. The stormtrooper sergeant instinctively raised her weapon, her comms buzzing with frantic warnings. Hold! You are ordered to report to Colonel Kestis.
Do not engage without authorization.
Kalen stepped forward, placing a hand on Kal-El's arm. Kal-El, the colonel needs to brief you, to understand you. He's the one who can deploy you effectively. Many more lives could be saved if you act strategically. Kal-El hesitated, his gaze torn between the desperate battle and Kalen's logic. He saw the genuine distress on Kalen's face, the exhaustion, the grim determination. Lives are being lost now, he said, his voice laced with urgency. Many more will be lost if we don't coordinate, Kalen countered, a rare moment of defiance. Trust me, a A single man, even you, cannot win this war alone. Not on Cadia. You need to understand the enemy and our objectives. Kal-El looked at Kalen, then at the stormtrooper sergeant, then back at the battle. He seemed to weigh the immediate urge to save against the long-term strategic need. With a deep sigh, he nodded. Very well, Sergeant, lead on. But I will not stand idle if the bastion itself is threatened. The stormtrooper sergeant lowered her weapon, visibly relieved, and motioned for them to follow. They moved through the fortified entrance, a maze of blast doors and reinforced corridors, the sounds of battle echoing even through the thick walls. Wounded guardsmen were being tended to, vital supplies moved, grim-faced officers barking orders. The air inside was thick with the smell of ozone, blood, and sweat. Finally, they reached the command center. It was a cavernous chamber, packed with Vox operators, strategists, and officers poring over holographic maps that depicted the planet's agonizing collapse. At the center, a grim-faced man with the stern features of a Cadian veteran, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos, stood before a massive tactical display. This was Colonel Kestis. Kestis turned as they entered, his gaze immediately falling on Kal-El, sweeping over his form-fitting blue suit, the red cape, the alien symbol. His eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed nothing but intense scrutiny. Colonel Kestis, sir, Kalen reported, snapping to attention. Sergeant Kalen, 88th Cadian, with the entity known as Kal-El, or Superman, as ordered. Kestis merely nodded, his gaze still fixed on Kal-El. Kal-El, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Sergeant Kalen's reports are astonishing. Impossible by all known Imperial doctrine. Explain yourself. Your origins, your powers, your purpose here. Kal-El stood tall, unfazed by the Colonel's imposing presence. He recounted his story, the dying planet Krypton, the journey in the pod, the search for a new home. He spoke of his desire to help, to use his powers for the greater good, to uphold truth and justice. Kestis listened, his face a mask of stone. Around them, the command center buzzed with activity, but many eyes were covertly fixed on the silent, impossible figure at the center. When Kal-El finished, Kestis remained silent for a long moment. Truth and justice, Kestis finally said, his voice laced with dry skepticism. Noble sentiments, Kal-El, but this is Cadia. Truth here is that the universe is a cold, brutal place. Justice is an imperial bolt round in the head of a heretic. Hope is a prayer to a silent emperor. And peace is a lie. He gestured to the holographic map, where red markers representing enemy forces were steadily encroaching on the last bastions of imperial defense. We are dying here. Billions have already fallen. More will follow. Can you save them? Kal-El's expression hardened. I will do everything in my power to try. Kestis gave a curt nod. Sergeant Kalen reported your abilities. Impervious to weaponry, flight, impossible strength and speed. He also reported your aversion to lethal force. Against the enemies of mankind, Kal-El, that is a luxury we cannot afford. Chaos breeds like a disease. It must be purged utterly. I believe every life is precious, Colonel, Kal-El replied, his voice firm. Even those who are lost. I will incapacitate, disarm, disable. I will remove the threat. But I will not take a life if there is another path to victory. Kestis stared at him, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Very well, your methods are unorthodox, bordering on insanity for any sane soldier of the Imperium. But your results against a Chaos Knight speak for themselves. You wish to help. I will give you that opportunity. He turned to the tactical map, his finger tracing a red line of enemy advance. The enemy's main thrust is here. He indicated a sector known as the Steel Labyrinth, a vast industrial district. A combined force of Chaos Space Marines, demon engines, and cultist hordes are pushing towards the central power conduits that feed the Bastion's main plasma reactor. If those conduits are destroyed, the Bastion becomes a tomb. Our own forces there are depleted, falling back to defensive lines. They are facing overwhelming numbers. Our counterattack failed. We are losing control of the sector. He looked back at Kal-El. Your mission, should you accept it, is to secure the Steel Labyrinth. Drive back the enemy. Protect the power conduits. Our forces will provide targeting data and support where possible. Can you accomplish this, Kal-El? Alone? Kal-El's gaze was fixed on the tactical display, his eyes seeming to absorb every detail. I can. I will protect these conduits. Kestis nodded, then turned to Kalen. Sergeant, you are to remain with him. Your comms link will be his primary source of information. You will report his every action, his every observation. You will relay my orders, and you will ensure he follows them, as best as an unarmored man can. Understood, Colonel, Kalen replied. Good. Time is of the essence. Sergeant, escort him to the main breach point in the steel labyrinth, grid Echo 95. It is approximately 5 kilometers from here, heavily contested. Our lines are falling back from that position now. Kestis's eyes held Kalen's. This is a gamble, Kalen. Kadia's last desperate gamble. Do not disappoint me, Kalen swallowed. No, sir. Kal-El turned to Kalen, a look of quiet resolve on his face. Sergeant, I am ready. Kalen led Kal-El out of the command center, the buzz of activity resuming around them. As they walked, Kalen quickly briefed him. The steel labyrinth is a nightmare of factories, collapsed bridges, and narrow alleyways, perfect for ambush. The power conduits are massive, shielded energy lines that run underground, but sections are exposed. Expect heavy resistance, especially from the Chaos Space Marines. They are bigger, stronger, and faster than a normal human, and they have powerful weapons. I understand, Kal-El said, his voice calm. Show me the way. They arrived at a heavily damaged section of the bastion's outer wall, where a reinforced gate had been blown apart, opening into the ravaged industrial zone. Imperial Guard units were fighting a desperate rearguard action, falling back slowly, their numbers dwindling. The air was thick with smoke, the roar of battle, and the acrid smell of burnt promethium. This is it, Kalen shouted over the din, pointing into the maelstrom. Grid Echo 95. The power conduits are deeper within. Follow the main artery. Our forces are retreating from Sector 4, roughly 2 clicks in. That will be your first point of contact. Kal-El nodded. He turned to Kalen. Stay safe, Sergeant. Provide me with information as I go. Before Kalen could respond, Kal-El was gone. Not a blur, not a flash, but simply gone. He had launched himself directly into the teeth of the enemy advance. A single, impossibly fast figure against a tide of darkness. Kalen watched, his Voxcaster clutched in his hand, listening to the frantic reports from the command center. He's entered the labyrinth. Directing him to Sector 4, Chaos Space Marine units detected converging on the power conduit network. From Kalen's vantage point, he could see flashes of blue and red amidst the enemy lines. Chaos Space Marines, massive, hulking figures that had once inspired terror and awe, were being tossed aside like dolls. Demon engines, unholy constructs of metal and flesh, were being torn limb from limb, their monstrous forms twisted into useless scrap. Cultists scattered in sheer terror, their fanaticism broken by the sight of this impossible warrior. Sergeant Kalen, report. Kestis's voice cut in, sharp and demanding. What is he doing? What are his tactics? He is engaging the enemy directly, Colonel, Kalen yelled back, watching the chaos unfold. He's moving too fast for the enemy to track. He's dismantling their weapons, ripping apart demon engines, taking out their heavy armor. He's neutralizing without lethal force, sir, just as he stated. A strained grunt from Kestis. Unbelievable, but effective by the Emperor. The red markers on the map are receding. He's pushing them back. Kal-El moved through the steel labyrinth like a force of nature. He located the first critical power conduit section, a massive glowing tube snaking through a ruined factory floor. Several Chaos Space Marines were converging on it, their chain axes raised to sever the vital connection. He arrived in a burst of speed, deflecting a volley of bolter fire with an open palm. The bolter shells, designed to explode upon impact, simply flattened against his skin, then fell harmlessly to the ground. One Chaos Space Marine, a towering warrior of the Wordbearer's Legion, roared defiance, lunging with his plasma pistol. Kal-El caught the weapon, twisted it into a mangled wreck, and then delivered a precise, non-lethal blow that sent the Space Marine crashing through a ferrocrete wall. Unconscious, another Chaos Marine, a Black Legionnaire, fired his heavy bolter, a torrent of explosive shells. Kal-El met the barrage, his eyes glowing, and the shells detonated harmlessly inches from his body, creating a momentary shimmering shield of pure force. He then charged, moving faster than the eye could follow, disarming the heavy bolter, and then disabling the Space Marine with a series of concussive blows. He was a blur of blue and red, a whirlwind of impossible power. He moved from one threat to another, stopping demon engines from breaching the conduits, disarming cultists who tried to plant melter charges, and neutralizing Chaos Space Marines who attempted to destroy the vital power lines. Each strike was perfectly measured, enough to incapacitate, never to kill. Weapons were bent, armor was dented, but never a fatal blow was struck. Kalen, watching the tactical display, saw the enemy's advance falter, then reverse. The red markers began to recede, falling back in disarray. The Imperials who had been retreating now saw the impossible figure fighting in their midst, turning the tide, and their morale surged. They rallied, pushing forward, exploiting the chaos Kal-El had sown. "He's cleared Sector 4, Colonel," Kalen reported, exhilaration coloring his voice. "The conduits are secure." "Excellent," Kestis replied, a hint of genuine awe in his tone. "Direct him to Sector 7. Another major power conduit junction is under heavy assault from a force of Nurgle-worshipping cultists and a Hellbrute. Our forces there are nearing collapse." Kalen relayed the coordinates. Kal-El, already moving, shifted his trajectory. He arrived at Sector 7 to find a horrifying tableau. Nurgle cultists, bloated and diseased, swarmed around a massive walking demon engine known as a Hellbrute. The Hellbrute, a grotesque fusion of corrupted flesh and metal, armed with a multi-melter and a power fist, was carving a path of destruction towards the conduits. Imperial Guard forces were being melted by its melter blasts, or crushed by its fist, their cries echoing in the foul, pestilential air. The Hellbrute turned its baleful, glowing eye to Kal-El, sensing an unprecedented threat. It roared, a guttural sound of pure hatred, and unleashed a torrent of multi-melter fire. The superheated blasts, capable of vaporizing ceramite, struck Kal-El. Again, they simply dissipated, causing him no harm. Kal-El charged. He met the Hellbrute's massive power fist, head-on, stopping the multi-ton blow with a single hand. The ground cracked beneath his feet, but he held firm. With a colossal grunt of effort, he began to push back. The Hellbrute, a monster of immense power, found itself unable to move, its corrupted engines straining against an immovable force. With a wrenching sound, Kal-El tore the multi-melter from the Hellbrute's arm, twisting it into a useless knot of metal. The Hellbrute shrieked, its other arm ending in a giant claw, swiping at him. Kal-El dodged, then, with incredible speed, ripped open the Hellbrute's armored chest, exposing the tortured, demon-possessed occupant within. He didn't kill it. He reached in, and with precise, superhuman dexterity, tore out a series of internal conduits and control cables, effectively disabling the monstrous war machine without ending the life of the imprisoned space marine within. The Hellbrute slumped, inert, a grotesque statue of broken power. Kalen relayed the coordinates. Kal-El, already moving, shifted his trajectory. He arrived at Sector 7 to find a horrifying tableau. Nurgle cultists, bloated and diseased, swarmed around a massive, walking demon engine known as a Hellbrute. The Hellbrute, a grotesque fusion of corrupted flesh and metal, armed with a multi-melter and a power fist, was carving a path of destruction towards the conduits. Imperial Guard forces were being melted by its melter blasts or crushed by its fist, their cries echoing in the foul, pestilential air. The Hellbrute turned its baleful, glowing eye to Kal-El, sensing an unprecedented threat. It roared, a guttural sound of pure hatred, and unleashed a torrent of multi-melter fire. The superheated blasts, capable of vaporizing ceramite, struck Kal-El. Again, they simply dissipated, causing him no harm. Kal-El charged. He met the Hellbrute's massive power fist head-on, stopping the multi-ton blow with a single hand. The ground cracked beneath his feet, but he held firm. With a colossal grunt of effort, he began to push back. The Hellbrute, a monster of immense power, found itself unable to move, its corrupted engines straining against an immovable force. With a wrenching sound, Kal-El tore the multi-melter from the Hellbrute's arm, twisting it into a useless knot of metal. The Hellbrute shrieked, its other arm ending in a giant claw swiping at him. Kal-El dodged, then, with incredible speed, ripped open the Hellbrute's armored chest, exposing the tortured, demon-possessed occupant within. He didn't kill it. He reached in, and with precise, superhuman dexterity, tore out a series of internal conduits and control cables, effectively disabling the monstrous war machine without ending the life of the imprisoned space marine within. The Hellbrute slumped, inert, a grotesque statue of broken power. The Nurgle cultists, Their diseased forms, filled with a desperate zeal, swarmed Kal-El, their rusty blades and crude bludgeons lashing out. Their touch was sickening, their bodies oozing foul humors, but Kal-El moved through them like a phantom. He disarmed them, sending their weapons flying, pushing them away from the conduit with blasts of super breath that sent them tumbling, or with controlled, concussive strikes that rendered them unconscious without causing lasting harm. The very air around him seemed to shimmer, as if repelling the disease-ridden touch of the cultists. Sector 7 cleared. "Conduits secured," Kalen yelled into the Vox, his voice now filled with a desperate hope he hadn't felt in years. He saw the red markers on the tactical display vanish from Sector 7, replaced by a single, steady blue dot. Kal-El. "Remarkable." Kestis's voice came back, thin with amazement. "Absolutely remarkable. Direct him to Sector 5, critical reactor vent access points. A Khornate warband has breached the perimeter and is attempting to overload the Bastion's auxiliary plasma generators. They have a Daemon Prince with them." Kalen's blood ran cold. A Demon Prince. That was a whole new level of threat. A creature of the warp made manifest. A being of immense power, protected by the Dark Gods themselves. No Imperial Guard unit, even a company of Space Marines, would willingly face such a foe. "Kal-El, new target," Kalen voxed, his voice urgent. "Sector 5, reactor vent access points. Enemy is a Khornate warband, led by a Demon Prince. These are powerful demons, Kal-El. Pure warp energy. They are not flesh and blood as you understand it." Kal-El acknowledged with a curt nod, already a blur of motion heading towards Sector 5. Kalen watched the blue dot on the tactical map speed across the labyrinth, a single point of light cutting through a sea of red. He arrived at Sector 5 to find a scene of utter carnage. The air crackled with raw, malevolent energy. Guardsmen lay dismembered, their bodies torn apart by impossibly strong claws. At the heart of the destruction stood the Demon Prince, a towering, bat-winged monstrosity of crimson muscle and horned fury, its massive axe dripping with fresh blood. Around it, Khornate berserkers, howling with bloodlust, tore through the remaining Imperial defenders. The reactor vent access points, massive grills leading to the Bastion's generators, were already sparking, a dangerously unstable glow emanating from within. The Demon Prince itself was preparing a finishing blow, its axe arcing towards a critical control panel. Kal-El landed with a gentle thud, but the ground vibrated with his presence. The Demon Prince turned, its glowing red eyes fixing on him, a snarl twisting its horrific features. It sensed a power alien to the warp, a purity that burned its very essence. "What abomination is this?" the Demon Prince roared, its voice a grating cacophony of malice and fury. "Another puppet of the Corpse God. You will bleed for Khorne." It lunged, its massive axe whistling through the air, aimed to cleave Kal-El in two. Kal-El met the blow, not with a block, but with a sudden burst of heat vision from his eyes. Two searing red beams lanced out, striking the Demon Prince's axe. The demon weapon, forged in the fires of the warp, shimmered, then began to glow white-hot. The Demon Prince shrieked in pain, a sound of agony and disbelief, as its axe, a symbol of its power, melted and warped in its hands. It dropped the slagging metal, roaring defiance. Kal-El didn't hesitate. He surged forward, moving with blinding speed, a blue and red comet of pure force. He struck the Demon Prince with a barrage of precise, concussive blows, each one landing with the force of a battering ram. The Demon Prince, a creature that had shrugged off tank fire, staggered back, its demonic hide rippling under the impossible impacts. It tried to retaliate, its claws lashing out, but Kal-El was too fast, too agile. He focused his attacks on specific points, disrupting the demon's material form. He wasn't trying to kill it, but to destabilize its connection to the material realm. With a powerful, two-handed strike, he hit the Demon Prince square in the chest. A shockwave rippled outwards, knocking the Khornate berserkers off their feet. The Demon Prince shrieked, its form flickering, its connection to Cadia wavering. It roared, a guttural sound of pure rage, before exploding in a shower of warp energy. Banished back to the Eye of Terror, its physical manifestation dissolved. The Khornate berserkers, witnessing the impossible banishment of their Demon Prince, wavered. Their bloodlust faltered, replaced by a primal animalistic fear. Kal-El turned to them, his eyes glowing, and with a series of sonic claps and precise strikes, He disarmed them, knocked them unconscious, or sent them flying into walls. Their rage turned to whimpers. He then quickly sealed the sparking reactor vent access points with a blast of heat vision, fusing the damaged metal back together, stabilizing the auxiliary generators. The Demon Prince is banished.
Reactor vents secured.
Kalen shouted, his voice hoarse with adrenaline. He could barely believe what he was seeing and hearing. Kal-El had faced down a Demon Prince, a direct avatar of a Chaos God, and had banished it without lethal force. It was a miracle. By the Emperor's holy light, Kestis muttered on the Vox, the sheer disbelief in his voice palpable. He banished a Demon Prince without a single casualty. Kalen, his energy signature is off the charts. We are reading residual warp energy fluctuations from his last engagement, but his own presence seems to be purifying it. He is a force for good, Colonel, Kalen said, a fierce conviction in his tone. He truly is. Perhaps, Kestis conceded, a grudging respect entering his voice. But the battle is far from over. The enemy is rallying. They've adapted. Direct him to the primary assault tunnel. Grid Delta 2-1. They're deploying a full company of Plague Marines and a Lord of Contagion. It is our final critical choke point before the Bastion's inner sanctum. If they breach it, we are lost. Kalen relayed the information to Kal-El. This was it. The final, desperate stand. Kal-El arrived at the primary assault tunnel, a massive subterranean passage carved beneath the Bastion. The air was thick with the stench of decay and disease, the hallmarks of Nurgle. A full company of Plague Marines, grotesque, heavily armored space marines swollen with disease and corruption, lumbered forward, their blighted weapons spewing corrosive gases and deadly pathogens. Leading them was a Lord of Contagion, a hulking, scythe-wielding figure, its armor rusted and pustulant, radiating an aura of despair and entropy. The Plague Marines were notoriously resilient, their diseased forms shrugging off wounds that would kill any other space marine. Their weapons, like the plague spewers and blight launchers, fired virulent toxins designed to dissolve flesh and armor. Kal-El launched himself into the fray. He moved so fast that the Plague Marines, sluggish and ponderous in their corrupted armor, couldn't track him. He became a blue and red blur, tearing through their ranks. He disabled their plague spewers, bending the barrels, snapping the triggers. He disarmed their blight launchers, twisting the heavy weapons into useless knots of metal. When they tried to strike him with their corrupted cleavers and axes, he met them head-on, deflecting the blows, then delivering precise, concussive strikes that left them groaning, dazed, or unconscious amidst the noxious fumes. The Lord of Contagion, a formidable champion of Nurgle, sensed the unique threat and roared its challenge. It swung its massive rust-eaten scythe, a weapon capable of reaping souls. Kal-El met the scythe, not with his hands, but with a focused beam of heat vision, melting its very edge. The Lord of Contagion bellowed, its diseased form flickering, its eyes burning with malevolent fury. It manifested a wave of pestilential energy, a psychic attack designed to rot the very spirit. Kal-El winced, his brow furrowing in pain. This was different. This was not a physical attack, but something that struck at his very essence, a spiritual decay that sought to corrupt his purity. He staggered, but only for a moment. His eyes flared, a brilliant, defiant blue. With a roar of his own, a sound of pure, unyielding resolve, he pushed back against the psychic assault. He was a being of pure hope, and the despair of Nurgle found no purchase within him. He retaliated with a blinding barrage of heat vision, not aimed to destroy, but to destabilize. The Lord of Contagion, an ancient and powerful demon, reeled, its pustulant form crackling and sizzling under the concentrated energy. Kal-El then closed the distance, his speed incomprehensible. He delivered a series of rapid, focused blows, striking critical points on the demon's armor and form, disrupting its connection to the warp. With a final, explosive punch, he struck the Lord of Contagion in the chest, and the Demon Prince screamed, a sound of unholy agony, as its form dissipated into a cloud of green, sickening smoke. Banished from Cadia, the remaining Plague Marines, leaderless and broken, were quickly incapacitated. Kal-El then used his heat vision to seal the primary assault tunnel with molten rock and twisted metal, creating an impenetrable barrier. The tunnel is sealed. The Lord of Contagion is banished, Kalen shouted, his voice raw with emotion. He's done it, Colonel! He's secured the bastion! A wave of cheers erupted from the command center, clearly audible through the Vox. Kestus's voice, for the first time, held genuine admiration. By the Emperor Kalen he has. The main assault has been shattered. Tactical assessment indicates enemy forces are now in full retreat from the bastion's perimeter. He single-handedly saved the bastion. He saved us, but the celebrations were short-lived. Just as Kalen felt a fleeting moment of relief, a new alarm blared across the Vox. Commander Abaddon the Despoiler detected. His flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, is initiating a final orbital bombardment sequence on Cadia's Cadian Gate pylon network. Kalen's blood ran cold again. The Cadian Gate, the colossal pylons that held back the Eye of Terror, the planet's last desperate defense. If they fell, Cadia would be utterly consumed by the warp. Colonel Kestus, what is the status of the pylon network? Kalen yelled. Kestus's voice was grim. The network is already heavily damaged, Sergeant. The Vengeful Spirit is focusing all fire on the primary central pylon. If it collapses, the entire network will cascade. Cadia will shatter. We have no orbital defenses left that can stop Abaddon's flagship. This is it. The end. A profound, chilling despair settled over Kalen. They had fought so hard, endured so much, and now, even with Superman, it was still not enough. The scale of the war, the malevolence of chaos, was simply too vast. Kal-El. Kalen screamed into the Vox, his voice hoarse with desperation. Abaddon, the Despoiler. His flagship is attacking the planet's defenses. The Cadian Gate pylons. They hold back the Eye of Terror. If they fall, Cadia is lost. The planet will be consumed. Billions more will die. Can you reach his ship? Can you stop him? Kal-El, having just sealed the tunnel, looked up, his face etched with grim understanding. He could hear the distant growing rumble of the orbital bombardment, feel the planet itself beginning to tremble. He could sense the immense malevolent power emanating from orbit. He looked at Kalen, his eyes burning with an incandescent resolve. I can, he said, his voice imbued with a quiet, terrible certainty. I will. He launched himself skyward, a blue and red arrow piercing through the smoke-choked atmosphere, faster than any starfighter. Kalen watched him go, a tiny speck against the vast, dying sky. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, flared in Kalen's chest. Kal-El broke through Cadia's upper atmosphere in moments, leaving a trail of superheated air in his wake. Above him, massive, corrupted warships of the Black Legion filled the void, their weapons spitting destruction at the world below. At the heart of this armada was the Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon's flagship, a behemoth of twisted metal and dark power, its colossal prow cannon glowing with unholy energy as it prepared to deliver the final blow to the central Cadian pylon. Kal-El flew towards the Vengeful Spirit at impossible speeds, weaving through the chaos of battle, dodging turbolaser fire that tore through space, ignoring the hails of macro cannon shells. He was a single, defiant beacon against the overwhelming darkness. He reached the Vengeful Spirit, a monstrous vessel kilometers long, and slammed into its outer hull. The impact, instead of destroying him, sent shockwaves through the adamantium plating, shaking the entire ship. Alarms blared across the flagship. Abaddon the Despoiler, watching the planet's imminent demise from his command bridge, turned at the sudden tremors. What in the warp was that? He roared, his voice laced with fury. Kal-El tore through the outer hull like paper, a streak of blue and red carving a path of impossible destruction through the ship's internal structure. He moved with a speed that bypassed all defenses, through layers of armor, through bulkheads, heading directly for the command bridge, for the source of the malevolence. He burst onto the command bridge in a shower of sparks and mangled metal, landing squarely before Abaddon, the War Master of Chaos, a towering figure in Terminator armor, armed with the Talon of Horus and Drachenyen, stood amidst his shocked retinue. Abaddon's eyes, burning with dark power, narrowed at the sight of the impossibly clean, unblemished figure. Who dares? Abaddon thundered, his voice resonating with demonic power. What Xenos filth is this? I am Kal-El, and I am here to stop you, Superman declared, his voice calm, resolute, cutting through the chaos of the bridge. Abaddon merely laughed, a cold, guttural sound. Stop me, you a single unarmored fool? You stand before Abaddon the Despoiler. I am the architect of Cadia's demise. I am the bane of the Imperium. You are nothing. He lunged, his immense power claw, the talon of Horus, crackling with energy, aiming to crush Kal-El, while Draconian, the demon sword, pulsed with hungry malevolence. Kal-El dodged the claw with impossible speed, a blur of motion. The talon of Horus smashed into the bridge's reinforced tactical display, shattering it. He then met Draconian, the demon sword that could cleave souls, with an open palm. The demon blade shrieked, a sound of pure agony, as it failed to cut, failed to harm, failed to even scratch the pure flesh of Kal-El. The sword trembled in Abaddon's grip, its demonic essence recoiling from the touch of such unadulterated hope. Abaddon's eyes widened in genuine shock, a flicker of fear in their depths. This was not a foe he understood. This was something beyond the calculus of chaos. Kal-El, seeing the weapon's inability to harm him, focused his heat vision on the demon sword. Two intense beams of red energy lanced out, striking Draconian. The demon blade shrieked again, more intensely this time, its form distorting, twisting, as the concentrated energy disrupted its very essence. It began to dissolve, to dissipate, banished back to the warp in a flash of dark fire, leaving only a fading wail. Abaddon roared in fury and disbelief, his ancient sentient demon sword destroyed. He lunged again with the talon of Horus, his rage absolute. Kal-El met the power claw, not to destroy, but to contain. He gripped the massive gauntlet, its power field crackling against his skin, and with a grunt of immense effort, he began to bend the adamantium fingers. Abaddon fought back, his immense strength fueled by the dark gods, but he was losing. Slowly, inexorably, the talon of Horus, symbol of his authority, began to twist and warp under Kal-El's impossible strength. "I will not let you destroy this world," Kal-El declared, his voice echoing with righteous fury. With a final, shattering crunch, Kal-El twisted the talon of Horus, mangling its intricate mechanisms, disabling its power field, reducing it to a twisted, useless gauntlet. Abaddon stared at his ruined weapon, his face a mask of primal rage and impotent fury. Kal-El then delivered a precise, open-palmed strike to Abaddon's chest. The Warmaster of Chaos, a being of immense power, flew backwards, smashing through the command bridge's control consoles, his Terminator armor groaning under the impact. He lay sprawled amidst sparks and shattered glass, momentarily stunned, but not killed. Kal-El stood over Abaddon's unmoving form, his eyes burning with resolve. He then turned to the main viewport, where the planet Cadia glowed defiantly below, the central pylon still intact but critically damaged. He could feel the last desperate tremors of its energy fading. He looked at the ship's primary weapon system, still aimed at the pylon, ready to fire its final, catastrophic shot. He flew to the massive weapon conduit, tearing open the thick plating. He used his heat vision to sever the power lines, to melt the firing mechanisms, to disable the massive weapon system completely. The vengeful spirit was disarmed. Then, with a final, desperate act, Kal-El used his immense strength and speed. He began to dismantle the vengeful spirit itself. He flew through the ship's core systems, tearing out vital components, melting power relays, disrupting the immense warp engines. He wasn't trying to kill the crew, but to disable the ship, to render it useless as a weapon of war. He moved so fast that the Black Legionnaires attempting to stop him were mere blurs, their weapons useless against his speed and invulnerability. The vengeful spirit, crippled and reeling, began to drift, its engines sputtering, its weapons systems offline. Abaddon's vast armada, suddenly without their flagship's devastating fire and seeing their Warmaster's vessel crippled by a single impossible foe, faltered. Confusion and a primal, unfamiliar fear spread through the Chaos Fleet. On Cadia, Kalen watched the tactical display in stunned disbelief. The red markers representing the vengeful spirit winked out, then reappeared as a crippled, drifting hulk. The orbital bombardment on the pylon network ceased. "Colonel, the vengeful spirit is crippled. Abaddon's fleet is breaking formation. They're retreating!" Kalen shouted, pure elation washing over him. The Bastion's command center erupted in cheers once more, a roar of triumph that echoed through the fortress. Kestus's voice was filled with a mix of awe and bewilderment. Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. He did it. He saved Cadia. But at what cost? He's still up there, inside that ship. Can he survive? Even him? As if on cue, A familiar blue and red streak shot out from the crippled, vengeful spirit, leaving the dark, chaotic armada behind. Kal-El descended, a triumphant return, a lone hero against the backdrop of a broken fleet. He landed gently in the bastion's courtyard, right before Kalen and his squad, his cape billowing gently around him. He was unharmed, not a scratch, not a speck of dust, but his face was etched with a profound weariness, a deep, abiding sadness. He had stopped the destruction, but the cost, the sheer scale of the suffering he had witnessed, weighed heavily on him. Kalen ran forward, followed by his squad, and even Colonel Kestis emerged from the bastion, flanked by his officers. "Kal-El, you did it!" Kalen exclaimed, his voice filled with an almost childish wonder. "You saved Cadia! You saved us all!" Kal-El offered a small, tired smile. "I stopped them from destroying the pylons, Sergeant. But the planet, it is still scarred. The war is not over." He looked up at the sky, at the Eye of Terror, still churning malevolently on the horizon, but now held at bay by the restabilized pylon network. "There is still so much suffering, so much hatred." Kestis stepped forward, his stern face softened by a mixture of gratitude and profound respect. "Kal-El," he said, his voice deep, "you have accomplished the impossible. You have saved Cadia from utter destruction. You have proven yourself a true hero, a defender of humanity, despite your unusual methods. Cadia owes you a debt it can never repay." Kal-El nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the devastated landscape. "I wish I could do more. I wish I could bring peace here." "Peace is a distant dream in this galaxy, Kal-El," Kestis replied, a grim note returning to his voice. "But you have given us a fighting chance. You have bought us time, and you have given us something even more precious, hope. Hope that even in the darkest hour, there are still forces that fight for good." Kal-El looked down at the glowing silver orb he had secured in his pouch. He gently retrieved it, holding it in his hand. "My parents sent me here seeking a safe haven, a place where I could be a beacon of hope. This world, it is not safe, not yet, but it needs hope. Perhaps this is where I was meant to be." He looked at Kalen, at the weary, battle-hardened faces of the Cadian guardsmen. He saw their resilience, their unyielding spirit, even in the face of impossible odds. He saw a flicker of the truth and justice his parents had hoped he would embody, reflected in their desperate fight. "I will stay," Kal-El announced, his voice firm, resolute. "I will help you rebuild. I will fight with you against this chaos. I will protect this world and its people for as long as I can, but I will do it my way. I will continue to seek a path that does not involve taking a life." Kestis, after a moment of consideration, gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Your way, then. It has proven remarkably effective. The Imperium may not understand you, Kal-El, but we will accept your aid. We will work together. Sergeant Kalen, you remain his liaison. Your mission now is to bridge the gap between this Superman and the grim realities of our war-torn galaxy." Kalen snapped to attention, a surge of pride and renewed purpose filling him. "Yes, Colonel, I understand." Kal-El looked at Kalen, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Sergeant Kalen," he said, his voice gentle, "it would be an honor to fight alongside you." Kalen, a simple Cadian sergeant, looked into the impossible blue eyes of the last son of Krypton. He had faced demons, traitors, and unspeakable horrors. He had seen countless acts of barbarity and despair. But now, standing before him, was a man who embodied something entirely different. A man who brought light to the darkness, who offered strength without malice and hope without deceit. Cadia was still dying, slowly, inexorably. The Eye of Terror still loomed. The war for humanity's survival was far from over. But for the first time in a very long time, Kalen felt a glimmer of something he thought had been lost forever. He felt hope, and he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his Cadian soul, that with Superman by their side, Cadia would not fall without one hell of a fight. And perhaps, just perhaps, they might even win. Kal-El turned, his red cape swirling around him, and looked out at the vast, broken landscape of Cadia. The sounds of distant battle still echoed, a constant reminder of the war that raged. But for now, here, in this shattered bastion, there was a momentary lull, a breath of defiance. He was the last son of a dead world, sent to find a safe home. He hadn't found peace, but he had found purpose. And on Cadia, the bulwark against the darkness, a new impossible hero had finally found his home. He would stand for truth, for justice, and for the unlikely hope that even in the grim darkness of the far future, a single life could still make a difference. His gaze hardened with quiet resolve. He was Superman, and Cadia, in its dying breath, would become his new Krypton.